I was really worried about the Liberals' online censorship law in the last parliament called the Online Harms Act. I've seen what it's been doing in other countries that have similar laws like the UK. That Canadian law was absolutely on track to be passed and enacted. The Liberals, the NDP, and the Bloc all supported the bill, so it was a mathematical certainty. But then the collapse of the Trudeau government and the election had the effect of canceling all bills in Parliament that hadn't been passed yet. So that was saved by the bell. So the Online Harms Act itself has not yet been reintroduced, at least according to the parliamentary website, which is pretty detailed. But other bills have that same censorship content in it. I tell you, they're obsessed with censorship. The Liberal government puts a higher premium on censoring Canadian citizens than on pretty much any other policy. Bill C2, for example, we talked about it in passing before. It would allow Canada Post to open any letter or package without a search warrant. I'm sorry, that's crazy. But let me focus on Bill C9, which the Liberals call the Combating Hate Act. Now, let me stop you right there. Hate is a human emotion. You can no more tell someone not to feel an emotion that they are feeling than you can command someone to feel an emotion that they aren't feeling. It's just not how people work. It's not how emotions work. If all it took was to pass a law, we'd have passed the Everyone Love Each Other Act a long time ago and we'd be done. People don't work that way. But the good thing is we don't have to command people to feel a certain way, because what really matters is what people do with their feelings. You can use a feeling of hatred or anger as fuel to, inspire your fight for peaceful change. You can be motivated by love or by hate or by frustration or by whatever. As long as you keep it positive, constructive, that's a good thing. I think this idea that the state gets to tell you what you can or can't feel is inherently dangerous. And of course, it's authoritarian and invasive of your privacy. What's in your heart is up to you. It's what you do with your hands that's more relevant. And that's right there in the title of the bill. They are going to combat your feelings. That's not going to work, is it? Now, by the way, there absolutely has been an explosion of hate in Canada over the past 2 years, and more generally over the past decade. Part of it is the woke left, often white, old stock Canadians, university students, leftists in general, who have been taught critical race theory, and that white men are oppressors and Jews are oppressors. At least Israel is. But I think it's pretty clear just by watching what's going on the streets in the last 2 years, in Toronto and Montreal and Mississauga and Ottawa, and even in Calgary and Vancouver, the bulk of the overt hate, the anti-Semitic hate in Canada, it's imported from Muslim countries. I'm sorry to be blunt about it. It just is. A recent study showed that 96% of people in Indonesia were anti-Semitic. That's quite something, given that there are only about 200 Jews in the entire country. It's less than 1 in a million people there are Jews, but they all hate Jews. 97% of people in Kuwait, 97% of people in the West Bank and Gaza, they hate Jews. So if you bring in thousands, hundreds of thousands of people from these countries, why would it be a surprise that they have brought with them an ancient hatred? If you really wanted to stop hate, the human emotion, frankly, the way to do it would be not to try and rewire Canadians' feelings, but to stop the mass importation of people who have a profound cultural hatred towards Jews, in many cases towards Christians, towards the West in general. If you were really trying to stop hate, don't bring it in. But back to the bill. Let's go through it. It's only 10 pages long. Let me take you through it. Section 1 is just the name of the bill. Section 2 is interesting. It's called Willful Promotion of Hatred, Terrorism, and Hate Symbols. Everyone commits an offense who willfully promotes hatred against any identifiable group by displaying in a public place, a symbol that is principally used by or principally associated with a listed entity as defined in subsection 83.01. So what is that list? Well, it refers to the designated terrorist groups in Canada. You can see the entire list here. There's a few exceptions to the rule, but it's pretty much all Muslim terrorist groups. You can see that Canada has added narco-terrorists at the request of Donald Trump earlier this year, but it's pretty much a bunch of Muslim terrorist groups. So my read of this law is that flying the flag of a terrorist group would now become a crime in Canada. Now, I'm skeptical. Police, especially in big cities like Montreal and Toronto, have been ordered not to lay charges against pro-Hamas activists for other crimes like assault, harassment, trespass, uttering threats, or even just traffic offenses. I mean, compare the lack of enforcement against pro-Hamas extremists to the over-enforcement against peaceful truckers. To me, the craziest moment was that when the pro-Hamas extremists in my own neighborhood literally reenacted a scene involving a mannequin that was supposed to look like the former head of Hamas in the Gaza Strip, the Hamas terrorist Yahya Sinwar. In a Jewish neighborhood, they reenacted his last moments while blocking Jews on the sidewalk and screaming at Jews through a loudspeaker. Yeah, pretty sure that if assault charges aren't filed against Hamas protesters, flying a flag charges won't either. But we'll see. Of course, terrorist supporters can move faster than the law. In Canada and around the West, Hamas supporters have made up two new symbols. Believe it or not, one is a watermelon slice. So that's the symbol for Hamas and for attacking Israel. It's pretty tough to ban a watermelon image. And for some reason, Hamas supporters, wear the watermelon slice. Here's an employee of Flair Airlines wearing the Hamas watermelon. Always a good feeling to know that a terrorist supporter works for a Canadian airline. Yikes. And they also use the upside down red triangle, which unfortunately looks like the Canadian Tire symbol. It's a nod to Hamas propaganda videos where that red triangle indicates Hamas trying to kill someone. It's the targeting. Now, I've seen a few terrorist flags flying in Canada, for sure. And you see some crazy things out there. Here's David Menzies interviewing a delightful young lady who happens to be a terrorist supporter who was wearing machine gun earrings in Mississauga. But look, the problem in Canada really isn't with the flag or with earrings or with symbols, is it? It's with the law breaking. And the law breaking and the symbols comes from people that if you bring in 2 million or 3 million people to Canada who hate Jews, who hate Christians, who hate the West, look, earrings are the least of it. Flags are the least of it. The primary problem, the root of the problem is mass immigration. It's not the secondary issues, really. Secondary issues like the police being terrified to do anything about this. It's all coming back to the primary problem. The flag is not the problem. It's the people who would hold the flag. But let's keep moving. I want to go through the bill. You'll see that in addition to terrorist symbols being added, so are the old Nazi symbols, or at least a couple of them. Let me read. The Nazi Hakenkreuz, also known as the Nazi swastika, or the Nazi double Sigrun, also known as the SS bolts, or a symbol that so nearly resembles a symbol described in paragraph A or B that is likely to be confused with that symbol. So they're banning basically the swastika and the SS symbol. Now, I don't like Nazi flags or symbols. Again, there are plenty more, by the way. If you ban those, there's a Nazi symbol of the black sun, and there's a skull called the Totenkopf. Believe me, the Nazis had plenty of symbols. I don't think banning those symbols is going to change someone's mind. It's sort of like telling someone to shut up in an argument. Even if they do shut up, you haven't changed their mind. The primary problem remains. By the way, the number one users of Nazi symbols in Canada are pro-Hamas protesters. I haven't seen this many swastikas in my entire life combined as I have at a single one of these pro-Hamas marches. They bring swastikas every weekend to their anti-Israel protests, but not to fly in their own name. They're smarter than that. They fly the swastika to accuse the Jews of being Nazis. I would expect that they would challenge this law on constitutional grounds or challenge the use of it against them by claiming, no, we don't support the Nazis. We're accusing the Jews of supporting Nazis. That's why we have the swastika. Mark my words, they're going to say that. By the way, that offense of showing those symbols comes with a maximum 2-year sentence. But look at the defenses. This is tailor-made for the pro-Hamas protesters. This lists the defenses to this banning of the symbols. No person shall be convicted of an offense under subsection 2.2, A, if the display of the symbol was for a legitimate purpose, including a legitimate purpose related to journalism, religion, education, or art, that is not contrary to the public interest, or B, if in good faith the display of the symbol was intended to point out, for the purpose of removal, matters producing or tending to produce feelings of hatred towards an identifiable group in Canada. Let me translate into plain English. Absolutely, that will be used as an argument by Hamas supporters that they were flying the Nazi flags not as self-identification, but as accusations against the Jews to reveal what the Jewish Nazis are doing. That's what they say. Of course, that would say that in a court of law, and according to the bill, that would be a defense. Look, you cannot use the law to change a feeling in someone's heart. If you're serious about stopping hatred, you pretty much have to do that in your immigration policy, not in your after-the-fact police charges. And that's why I'm worried about this law, because I 100% know who is going to actually be targeted by it. You might see 1 or 2 token charges against terrorist flag flyers, maybe one a year. Though I haven't seen any charges for terrorism lately, even though synagogues and Jewish schools are vandalized so often, it doesn't even make the news anymore. I mean, look at this story. Police investigating after North York synagogue vandalized for 10th time. Yeah, that's just what police and politicians consider acceptable in Canada now. That's the new normal in Canada now. No charges. I mean, 10 attacks on this synagogue. If police cared, surely they'd set up a camera of some sort or even actually stake it out. But they don't really care, do they? I'll keep moving. The new law defines hatred, which is interesting. They say hatred means the emotion that involves detestation or vilification and that is stronger than disdain or dislike. All right, okay. So again, we're back to regulating emotions now. Funny, whenever some anti-Semitic criminal gets arrested, some terrorist, they're never called hate criminals, are they? They're always called mentally ill, aren't they? All right, back to the bill. They've revived the Online Harms Act proposal of having a standalone hate crime. This is actually the worst part of the bill. Quote, everyone who commits an offense, referred to in this section as the included offense, under this act or any act of parliament, if the commission of the included offense is motivated by hatred based on race, national or ethnic origin, language, color, religion, sex, age, mental or physical disability, sexual orientation, or gender identity or expression, is guilty of an indictable offense and liable to punishment provided for in subsection 5, or guilty of an offense punishable on summary conviction. You could be, if you're charged with any law in the country, if you feel hate in your heart at the same time, you can be also charged under the standalone hate crime, including if you disagree with or antagonistic to someone's gender identity. Gee, I wonder who they're going to use this against. And here's the penalty. Everyone who is found guilty of an indictable offense under subsection 1 is liable to a term of imprisonment of not more than, and then they have this sort of chart. Depends on the original offense. It could be 5 years, it could be 10 years, it could be 14 years, or absolutely incredible, if the maximum term of imprisonment for the included offense is 14 years or more. Up to life in prison, just for the feelings you have in your heart. This is a different offense than whatever crime you may commit. Life in prison. You don't get life in prison even for murder in Canada, I don't think. But you'll get life in prison for having very strong feelings of detestation. That shows you the priorities of this government, doesn't it?